The family was aware that Rommel was under suspicion and that his chief of staff and his commanding officer had both been executed. Rommel's 15-year-old son tells this account as he enters his home and finds his father at breakfast. At 12 o'clock today, 2 generals are coming to discuss my future employment. My father started the conversation. So today we'll decide what is planned for me, whether a people's court or a new command in the East. Would you accept such command? I asked. He took me by the arm and replied, "My dear boy, our enemy in the East is so terrible that every other consideration has to give way before it. If he succeeds in overrunning Europe, even only temporarily, it will be the end of everything which has made life appear worth living. Of course, I would go." Shortly before 12 o'clock, my father went to his room on the first floor and changed from the brown civilian jacket which he usually wore over his riding breeches to his Africa tunic, which was his favorite uniform. At about 12 o'clock, a dark green car with a Berlin number stopped in front of our garden gate. The only men in the house, apart from my father, were Captain Aldinger, a badly wounded war veteran, and myself. 2 generals, Burgdorf, a powerful florid man, and Maisel, small and slender, alighted from the car and entered the house. They were respectful and courteous, and asked my father's permission to speak to him alone. Aldinger and I left the room. So they are not going to arrest him, I thought with relief, as I went upstairs to find myself a book. A few minutes later, I heard my father come upstairs and go into my mother's room. Anxious to know what was afoot, I got up and followed him. He was standing in the middle of the room, his face pale. "Come outside with me," he said in a tight voice. "I have just had to tell your mother," he began slowly, "that I shall be dead in a quarter of an hour." He was calm as he continued. "To die by the hand of one's own people is hard, but the house is surrounded, and Hitler is charging me with high treason in view of my services in Africa," he quoted sarcastically. "I am to have the chance of dying by poison. The 2 generals have brought him with them. It's fatal in 3 seconds. If I accept, none of the usual steps will be taken against my family, that is, against you. They will also leave my staff alone." "Do you believe it?" I interrupted. "Yes," he replied. "I believe it. It is very much in their interest to see that the affair does not come out into the open. By the way, I have been charged to put you under a promise of the strictest silence. If a single word of this comes out, they will no longer feel themselves bound by the agreement." I tried again. "Can we defend ourselves?" He cut me off short. "There's no point," he said. "It's better for one to die than for all of us to be killed in a shooting affray. Anyway, we've practically no ammunition." We briefly took leave of each other. "Call Aldinger, please," he said. Aldinger had meanwhile been engaged in conversation by the general's escort to keep him away from my father. At my call, he came running upstairs. He, too, was struck cold when he heard what was happening. My father now spoke more quickly. "It's all been prepared to the last detail. I'm to be given a state funeral. I've asked that it should take place in Ulm. In a quarter of an hour, Aldinger will receive a telephone call from the Wagner Schule Reserve Hospital in Ulm to say that I've had a brain seizure on the way to a conference." He looked at his watch. "I must go. They've only given me 10 minutes. He quickly took leave of us again. Then we went downstairs together. As he went into the hall, his little dachshund, which he had been given as a puppy a few months before in France, jumped up at him with a whine of joy. "Shut the dog in the study, Manfred," he said, and waited in the hall with Aldinger. Then we walked out of the house together. The 2 generals were standing at the garden gate. We walked slowly down the path, the crunch of the gravel sounding unusually loud. As we approached the generals, they raised their right hands in salute. "Herr Field Marshal," Burgdorf said shortly, and stood aside for my father to pass through the gate. The car stood ready. The SS driver swung the door open and stood to attention. My father pushed his marshal's baton under his left arm and with his face calm, gave Aldinger and me his hand once more before getting in the car. The 2 generals climbed quickly into their seats, and the doors were slammed. My father did not turn again as the car drove quickly up the hill and disappeared round a bend in the road. When it had gone, Aldinger and I turned and walked silently back into the house. 20 minutes later, the telephone rang. Aldinger lifted the receiver, and my father's death was duly reported. It was not then entirely clear what had happened to him after he'd left us. Later, we learned that the car had halted a few hundred yards up the hill from our house in an open space at the edge of the wood. Gestapo men who had appeared in force from Berlin that morning were watching the area with instructions to shoot my father down and storm the house if he offered resistance. Maisel and the driver got out of the car, leaving my father and Burgdorf inside. When the driver was permitted to return 10 minutes or so later, he saw my father sunk forward, with his cap off and the marshal's baton fallen from his hand.